Hello, my name's Donald Nelson, and I'm from Balloch in Scotland on the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, and today's date is the 14th of October 2024. And I'm going to tell you a story about a place in the west coast of Scotland called Ardnamurchan. This is a story I got from the great Scottish storyteller Duncan Williams. And in Ardnamurchan, there was a farmer, and the farmer had a wife, and they had two children, a boy and a girl. And the problem with the farmer was he didn't believe in the wee folk. He didn't believe in the fairies. But every night, his children would put outside the door a wee pan of milk and a wee bit of bread and cheese to feed the fairy folk. And the farmer would say, "Oh, I don't know what you're doing that for. It's a lot of rubbish." And his children would say, "But the pans are empty in the morning." That's probably just foxes or badgers or something eating it. You know, it's a lot of rubbish. But here it was Halloween night. He said, "Well, let's just go out for a walk." So they put on their coats and they went out for a walk. And they walked up to the headland in Ardnamurchan, to the cliffs. And they were standing looking out over the sea. And all was quiet until they heard the noise. Whoosh! And they looked up, and coming towards them was something flying. And as they looked closer, they noticed it was a fairy host flying through the night in Halloween. And the farmer turned round to his wife and children and said, Did you see that? But they were gone. And he looked and he saw them getting lifted up into the air, right into the fairy host. And he was like, what kind of trick is this? What's happening? Who's behind this? But he didn't know what to do, so he just went home. And he went home and he sat in his chair by the fire, thinking, they are going to walk through that door any minute and laugh at me. But that didn't happen. And it didn't happen for a long, long time. It didn't happen until almost a year later. And the farmer, he'd spoken to everybody, he'd told everybody what happened, and nobody had a solution. Nobody knew what to do. Until one of them said, why don't you go up to the top of the hill there, to that wee cottage, old Maggie's cottage? She might be able to tell you what to do. And he went, she's just an old woman, what can she do? And somebody said, well, they do say that old Maggie is a wise woman, and she might just have an answer. And the farmer thought, last solution, I suppose. So he trudged up the hill and he knocked on Maggie's door. And Maggie opened the door and said, yes, can I help you? And the farmer told her the story. And she said, well, that's what you get for not believing in the wee folk. He said, what can I do? And old Maggie said, on Halloween night, take the sharpest knife you've got and go back to where your family get picked up by the fairy host and wait until they come. And when the fairy host flies by, throw your knife as hard as you can into the fairy host. And the farmer says, I might hurt somebody, I might hit my wife and my children. And Maggie says, well, I've told you the best idea, so you're as well trying it anyway. He went, okay, thank you, and Maggie shut the door. And he trudged away back down the hill, and he waited until Halloween night. And he got his sharpest knife, and he walked up to the heads of Ardnamurchan Point. And he stood there, and he waited, and he waited, and he waited, And he thought, that old woman, she's played a trick on me. But then he heard the noise, and he saw them coming in the distance, and he got ready. And when they flew over, he threw the knife as hard as he could into the fairy host. And the fairy host just whizzed by. Oh, that was a trick that's been played on me. But then he noticed three feathers, 3 white feathers coming and landed on the ground. And he thought, well, that's it. Don't know what to do now. And he turned to walk away. And then he heard a voice, darling, and daddy, daddy. And he turned round, and there, standing before him, was his wife and 2 children. And they all went back to the farmer's cottage. And the farmer said to his wife, you know, I've been suffering for a year since you disappeared, an absolute year. And she said, what are you talking about? It's only been a day. He said, well, it seemed like a year to me. And she said, well, we're home now. But ever since that night, the farmer was a believer. And every night, him, along with his children, we put in a wee pan of milk and a wee bit of bread and cheese for the fairy folk. And the only real lasting reminder of what happened is a tiny, tiny little scar on his wife's forehead. And he's now a believer. Thank you.